Hey guys, True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws at Bluesaws.com. I got a saw I was gonna talk quick about. I had to run it to test it out, so I figured I'd mess with it real quick and do a quick video. This is a G440, a Farmertec G444 that I sold. It hasn't been a year, I don't know when. Anyhow, the saw comes back with not a lot of time on it. Something's wrong, okay, and it's wrong. Pulls over, has compression, but it's not right. Break it down, winds up being the crank. And in that batch of saws, for some reason, I actually had two. Hit the road. Get. I actually had two crank failures. And I guess it's worth talking about that because I don't see that very often. We sell a lot of saws, and it's very rare that I see a crank failure, and to have two right around the same, I'd even think it was on the same pallet of saws, was kind of odd. And I haven't heard about a lot of other saws failing, and this is 6 months ago this saw got sold, so whatever the stock was 6 months ago, and I didn't hear a lot of people complaining, and we sold a boatload of them, so I would have heard back from my customers because both saws failed fairly quickly. The other one that I know of, Matt Wood had at, what the heck? Why can't I think of his shop name while I'm on video? Two Stroke and Chainsaw Shop. He had one that failed. He said, the first tank of gas had failed, first tank of fuel. This one here, I think he had more in it because I see there was some wear on it and it was run pretty good. But I don't think it had 10 tanks of fuel through it, and the crank failed. And a lot of times those will fail. If there's something wrong, they're gonna fail pretty quick. And I don't know if they had somebody, it was their first day making cranks, and the first two cranks that they made were bad, and I just wound up getting those two cranks. Because again, I didn't hear it from a lot of folks that there was problems with the 440s and crank failures. I'm sure out of 100,000 saws, there has to be some number that fail. It's just odd that I got two of them around the same time. Didn't hear much more about it, so I don't know, what's the failure rate? 1 out of 100 would be 1%. 10 out of 1,000 would be 1%. Out of 100,000 of these saws, I'm not saying we sold 100,000, but 1,000, I didn't get that many people back. Anyhow, all I was going to do was run this real quick. The other thing I noticed was that he must have broke the pull rope right off. And I've seen a bunch of these, especially on the 440s. I don't like the rope that they use on them. More often than not, the rope is shitty on the 440s. And a lot of them I've seen where they put the knot in the top and the knot's not big enough and it pulls right through the handle, and that's what it looks like this one might have did, because it felt like it was a full-size rope. I started this saw, I ran it, so it was a full rebuild, did the crank, the bearings. When I went to do it, the first time I pressure tested it after getting the crankcase buttoned up, I had an air leak. I had two air leaks actually, and it was frustrating me, and I don't love using the metal base gaskets. Personal preference, guys. I know some guys love them. I wound up just making a base gasket, knocking 10,000ths off the squish, and I wasn't trying to hot rod the saw. It's just the gasket material that I use, I know, is 9,000ths instead of 22,000ths, so really I knocked a little more than 10,000ths off the squish, and I had room to do it. But I like having real gasket material gaskets, so maybe I'm funny like that. I don't love the metal gaskets. Anyhow, there was a leak around the gasket, and of course I had a leak on the what do they call it, bearing spacer, or I call it a bushing that goes where the worm gear is over the crank. I ordinarily will put a O-ring in that because the old 044 IPL actually called for it. Years later, in some of the MS440 IPLs or service manuals, they actually deprecated that, like you didn't need the O-ring anymore. And I don't know if the original 044s, the machining wasn't good enough, so it got an O-ring, and then as steel improved their machining, you didn't need an O-ring anymore. And I think it's the same on the 372 XP. So anyhow, what I wound up doing was a tip my friend Manny uses all the time, and I have O-rings, so I never have to use it. So this is the first time I actually used it, was to use some 3-bonder. Actually, it was Honda Bond in there instead. So I gave it a quick smear of Honda Bond, and it's sealed up nice and tight, and it seemed fine. But again, I'm going to run it a little bit. I figured I'd make one cut on video because it's not that thrilling at this point for you guys to see me cut with something that's not super modified. You know, the only thing it has is a little bit of a base gasket reduction. Other than that, it's a stock saw with not that much time on it that had to get rebuilt. So hopefully, you know, my bearings hold up, my crank holds up, and everything that I did held up. But it was a smooth thing, no problem. So it should be fine. And I'll just give it a quick run and see what we got. The chain, sharpen the chain, and listen, I sharpen chains how I sharpen them. But when I felt it, it didn't feel the sharpest, and sometimes I think I get a little bit of a burr that maybe I got to take off, but once it goes in the wood, it seems like it cleans right up. So we'll see how this chain is. I'm not promising it's my best, but it should be decent. I'll be mad if it's not decent. This isn't great. Anyhow, guys, she seems okay. She cut nice enough. The chain didn't even seem bad, so I guess I did all right on that. Nothing to say. I'll tell you, she was oiling like a slob before I had the bar on and I was running it, just making sure everything was sound. That thing was oiling like crazy. It's got a nice oiler in it, and I don't know if Farmertec's improved those 44 oilers to put a little more output out, but that's a darn nice oiler in that one because it was gobbing out oil. I don't know what else to tell you. Sometimes you get them and they break. Again, we've had saws, you know, brand new saws we don't have a lot of problems with, especially after we go through them. We definitely don't have problems with them. But, you know, we've had some ship without a worm gear in it, or something's missing, or they didn't do something right on the saw at the factory, and we catch a lot of that stuff. But overall, it's been great, and if you've had problems with the 44 cranks, let me know. I just didn't hear about it, and like I said, this is a 6-month-old saw, so it was in a, you know, 6, 7, 8-month-old in that batch family there. Let me know if you heard anything, because I sure didn't. But again, maybe I didn't hear it. Anyhow, guys, that was it. Not going to ramble on. True Grit Scott, Bulletproof Saws, and Bluesaws.com. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.